Hello, Hoosier fans, Hoosier haters, and everyone in between. This is the Crimson Coliseum podcast. Now, today's episode, I want to talk about the Hoosiers' win over the Maryland Terrapins, 42 to 28. And I think this was a good win. It's not a fantastic win. There's a lot of things that need to get fixed, offensively mainly. But Indiana played, I think, a really good game against a Big Ten opponent that may not be as good as what we thought, but it's still going to be a tough out for anyone if fully healthy. So to go into the player stats, Curtis Rourke led the way. 22 of 33, 359 yards, three touchdowns, two interceptions, and five rushes for -9 yards and a fumble. And we'll talk about the turnovers a little bit later, but after those two interceptions on back-to-back plays, I think Curtis Rourke really composed himself and was able to dominate the rest of this game. Um, And it just shows like why you kind of need that veteran presence at quarterback. Is that whenever you have the two turnovers in a row, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna compose yourself? How are you gonna go into the next play? And which is why I'm really happy for this season, the way it's going. Tyson Lawton led the way on the ground with 19 rushes for 93 yards and a touchdown, also getting two receptions for 18 yards. And Justice Ellison had 12 rushes for 51 yards and a touchdown, with one reception for 5 yards. And the rushing attack, it's been the same. It's been ho hum. Like they're gonna do what they do all week in week out, and never. I haven't. Hopefully, you don't have to complain much about the running game. Uh, I know against UCLA, they stiffened up. It was the defense, UCLA defense stepped up a little bit, but we were able to attack using the run and then open up the passing game for Rourke, especially in the second half. Receiving wise, Elijah Surratt, 7 receptions, 128 yards and a touchdown. Waffle House was always open, especially against those freshman DBs. Waffle House just kept getting those easy receptions. Omar Cooper, 4 receptions, 83 yards and a touchdown on it with a great end of half drive there. And Miles Price, 2 receptions for 63 yards, as well as a 1 yard rushing touchdown, which I think should have been a passing touchdown. I think it's stupid that a backwards pass is considered. I think. I know it's supposed to be general, but if the quarterback's in his throwing motion and throwing behind him, that's a pass. But if it's a toss, it's a toss. Like that should be a distinction, but that's just me. Receiving the receivers, I think we had 10 guys with the reception. It was very, very fun today, receiving wise. Well, yesterday. Um, a lot of guys were getting open. Um, Work was able to hit him pretty well. You take what you can get there. Defensively was really good too. Aiden Fisher, 12 tackles, five solo, a half a tackle for loss, and a half a sack. Aiden Fisher was everywhere. Now he's at 10 tackles a game. He's gonna be at 50 tackles on the season, which is like kind of crazy. He's on pace for 120 tackles this season. D'Angelo Pons actually is gets his first double-digit tackle game of the season, I think. 10 tackles, seven solo, half a tackle for loss, and one pass defended. He had the toughest challenge out of anyone guarding Ty Felton. And even if Ty Felton was came out in the third quarter, he let up a wide open touchdown a little bit, but and had a miscommunication with Asbury in the third quarter. But I think he had a really solid game though. Speaking of Sean Asbury, he had 8 tackles and two solo tackles. Jalen Walker also 8 tackles, two solo, while also adding a tackle for loss, half a sack, and one pass defended. Mikal Kamara, 7 tackles, one solo, one sack, and a half tackles for loss. I couldn't find the pressures or the QB hits stats anywhere, but those have got to be super high because Mikal Kamara and CJ West were in the backfield almost every passing play. He just dominated the game in that, even if the stats really don't show it. And then James Carpenter, 3 tackles, three solo, 2 tackles for loss, and two sacks. That front six is just nasty. If there is like a weaker offensive line, that front six is just gonna expose it, and it's gonna make life hard for the quarterbacks. I was really impressed by the defense. I knew they were going to get a lot of yards in the passing game. It's Maryland. Maryland's always had a good passing attack, and it didn't change with Billy Edwards at quarterback, so not too shocked. Speaking of Billy Edwards, he was 26 of 41, 289 yards and three touchdowns. I liked like there were some wide open plays that blown coverages, but I really think this defense stepped up against him. Rushing, Henry had 10 carries, 117 yards, and a touchdown with a 75-yard touchdown, which really should not have happened. That umpire just blocked D'Angelo Pons there from an easy tackle. And they had five receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown. But outside of Hembry, the other guys everyone else had -5 rushing yards, which is kind of crazy. Receiving, Caden Prather led the way with five receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And then Ty Felton, the guy that I was worried about the most, only five receptions for 38 yards. And yes, he left with an injury, with what appears to be a concussion, with 11:23 left in the third quarter after his last reception. So who knows what could have happened in this game if he stayed in? And he got three receptions on that first drive in the third quarter. So who knows? But he only got two receptions in the first half. So Indiana was actually doing well to limit Ty Felton. Defensively, Michael Harris led the way, 10 tackles, four solo, and one tackle for loss. Levain Scruggs had six tackles, one solo, one pass defended, and one fumble recovery. Glendon Miller, six tackles, four solo, one interception. Caleb Wheatland, six tackles, five solo, two tackles for loss, a sack, a pass defended, and a fumble recovery. And then Jalen Husky, five tackles and interception. The Maryland's defense is very opportunistic. They had four turnovers in this game, and they earned all of them. There was none that say that they didn't really deserve, but it was a good game. It was a good game on both ends. Team stats wise, Indiana had 75 total plays, 33 rushing and 42, 33 passing and 42 rushing. 510 total yards, 359 passing yards, and 151 rushing yards. 7 of 13 on third down, which helps solidify that top three in the country third down percentage. 4 for 38 in penalties and four turnovers, two interceptions and two fumbles. We'll get into that later. For Maryland, they had 71 plays, 41 passing and 30 rushing for 401 yards, 289 passing yards and 112 rushing yards. 5 for 15 on third down, 0 for 3 on fourth down, and they had 10 penalties for 93 yards. And just looking at the team stats, Indiana dominated on the statistical department in every way. Like she just got it's just what it is. There's not much you couldn't like. There's things that Indiana needs to improve, but there's not much that like you didn't like about that. Here's some pros and cons. Outside of the turnovers, which we'll get into, the offense was great. Even with the turnovers, all four were in the opposing side of the field. Only four punts. James Evans had a really good day. We'll get into that a little bit later. Um, Everything was clicking for Indiana in most senses. So yeah. After the turnovers, though, the defense really stood up. Zero first downs, and of those four drives, I believe it was -9 yards allowed. So, like Indiana's, even though they did turn the ball over, the defense stepped up. Granted, whenever we scored, the defense decided not to step up, but that's beside the point. Uh, the pass rush was just putting pressure on Edwards all day. I would love to see how the QB pressures and the QB hits were because I was surprised we didn't get more roughing the passer penalties than we did. Speaking of penalties, we had zero offensive penalties. There was one PI that Ty Felton created from a second down at 31, which led to the first touchdown of the game for Maryland. Which, yes, it sucks. I'd rather the double move be called for a pass interference instead of a uh, a wide open catch that would go to a touchdown. Just is what it is. I'd rather that be the sequence, but that's just me. Granted, I don't know if that was pass interference. They should have probably called holding. That's just me. Uh, Crowd was so much better, but it can get better. We aren't sold out just yet. Can get better. We gotta keep getting better. And I think Signetti's email and text to the students worked. And I like that Signetti is having a connection with the fan base. That's one thing I really, really like about that. Outside of Pons getting just blocked by the umpire on that 75-yard touchdown, Maryland only had 37 rushing yards. It's what you like to see defensively. And for the third time since 1910, Indiana started season 5-0. And all of them were actually all of them in 57-year increments. 1910, 1967, and 2024. I just want to make sure, going back previously to 1910, just want to make sure that, oh yeah, there are no stats pre-night. There's no stats before that, so I can't really tell how, whenever if before, like in the night, like 1905, we went 8-1-1. 1904, we went 6-4. In 1901, we went 6-3. And 1899, we went 6-2. So can't really tell if we went. I think 1905 we started 8-0, just based on the looks of this on conference win percentage. But 1967 we started 8-0, so that's the mark we got to beat. But going to the cons, turnovers were rough. It just it was just rough. There's no way else you could slice it. Um, if we look at all four, um, you had Rourke overthrowing Price on a three man rush. Did not need to do that. He improved later in the game where he ran for I think 10 plus yards on a short rush, whatever that thing was there, but he just forced it. The second one that was more Keyshawn Williams than Rourke because whenever you go on that route, going that either it was an out or an in, basically when you go on that 90 degree angle route, he went back a little bit. He went more towards the more upfield, which allowed the defender to jump it. Can't really do that. And then the fumbles, one on I believe it was Kalen Black. That was just better defense, just good punch. And then on Rourke's fumble, he was rolled up in a weird way, and he just fumbled it. Like it sucks that the turnovers happen, but gotta understand how that feels because we haven't had a turnover all season before then, and what type of adversity that comes with it. Because we still scored 42 points with all the turnovers. It's what you like to see. We could have scored 70. Could have. Um, Speaking of turnovers, I think the lack of turnovers on the defensive end is kind of concerning. Like we don't force turnovers. We force stops. We get a lot of stops, but we don't force turnovers, which I think could hurt us in the future with really high-powered offenses that we need to turn the ball over on. But that's like the things I've really had issues with. Um, but also the pass defense, understandably, was a little bit lackluster. Forced 15 incompletions, which is good. Most of them were the second half, but you kind of want more. But also, our secondary is the weakest part of the team. Just is what it is. Going to my players of the week, offensively, we got Elijah Surratt, who had a fantastic game. Also, shout out Donovan McCulley getting his first catch of the season and first touchdown, too. Forgot to mention that. Defensively, Mikal Kamara with all of the pressure they put on Billy Edwards. And his special teams, for the first time, it's not Nicholas Radicic, it's James Evans. He had 4 punts today, 188 punt yards, around a 47 average, two inside the 20, and then one that landed on the 1 yard line right before the end of the game, which, hey, you like to see it. James Evans was my Heisman favorite going into last year, so you'd love to see some James Evans punts sometimes. And this is the Big Ten. So that's going to be it. Well, actually, before we end it off, We're going into Northwestern with a chance to go 6-0, with a chance to get to a bowl game, be the well, we would be the first team in the Big Ten to reach a bowl game if we win. If obviously going into Northwestern, and obviously I'll talk more about this later in the week when we get closer to it. But I heard that we are a 10-point favorite, which I could be wrong, and the sports books may be different, but that's just what I heard from Twitter. We have a great opportunity to get to that bowl game, bowl eligibility. And if we do, well, I think next week's episodes might be a little bit different than what I planned it to be. But that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Share on all platforms, and ask yourself, can Indiana go 9-0 before we get to Michigan?